A few weeks ago, I was working on a chapter about exception handling in Kotlin, and I put out a poll on LinkedIn and X, and the results kind of surprised me, so I thought we would take a look at those today. I asked this question. I said, how do you prefer handling exceptions in your Kotlin code? And the options were either try catch finally or run catching and result. Now, most Kotlin developers are familiar with try catch as a way of handling exceptions at runtime. It's certainly very familiar if you're coming from another language like Java or C# or even Ruby has something similar. And it works basically the same in Kotlin, with the addition that try is actually an expression in Kotlin. And so that means you can assign it to a variable, you can pass it as an argument to a function, you can return it from a function. Works really well if you're using an expression body. But otherwise, it's about the same, where you've got an exception being thrown and somewhere something is going to catch that, and it almost acts as kind of like a go-to statement in a way, because you're jumping out of the normal flow of your code. So it's familiar, but also its syntax is a little bit beefy. Now remember, in Kotlin, the compiler is not going to require you to deal with a thrown exception. So for example, in Java, you've got a category of exceptions that are called checked exceptions, and you've got to deal with those. So if you call a function that throws a checked exception in Java, you either have to catch it or you have to declare that you're going to duck it and let somebody farther up the call stack deal with it. Now, checked exceptions don't exist in Kotlin, so the compiler is not going to require you to handle them at runtime with a try catch, for example. But if you don't catch them, obviously the exception is just going to bubble up to the top and crash your app, so you definitely want to catch them. Now, another approach to exception handling in Kotlin is to use a standard library function called runCatching. And this function is actually built on top of a try expression. It uses an inline value class called result to store either a success or a failure. And that's actually what it was called when it was first introduced, was success or failure. If the code inside the lambda that you pass to runCatching, if that throws an exception, then that exception is going to be stuffed into the result object. And otherwise, the result object will contain the successful value that came out of that. And then once you've got a result object, you can do a few fun things with it. You can get a successful value or null. You can get an exception or null. You can give it a function to perform in a successful case or a function to perform in a failure case. You can map the result and so on. So those are the two contenders we're talking about here, try catch and run catching. Now, given the fact that try catch is so familiar in other languages, I was expecting with this poll that I put out that no more than, say, 15% or so of Kotlin developers would use run catching. But the results were actually quite higher. On LinkedIn, those preferring run catching were over twice as high as I expected, with a 1/3 to 2/3 split. And on X, it was even higher, with over 40% preferring run catching. So I don't know what you would have expected, but for me, that was kind of surprising. One thing I'm not as sure about here is whether the run catching crowd includes people who use other libraries with similar approaches, like you've got the either class in Arrow, for example. And some folks pointed out that the result class in the standard library is kind of limited compared to what you get in third-party libraries, and I can see where they're coming from. For one thing, it catches all throwables, so that's almost certainly a wider net than we would want most of the time. So in other words, we can't just tell it to catch certain kinds of exceptions. It's going to catch really any kind of throwable at all. Also, there's no way to accumulate multiple exceptions. So if you were doing something like maybe validating a form that a user is submitting, you might want to validate all of the fields on that form in one pass and kind of collect all of those exceptions. So if you're looking for something stronger, you've got some good options in the third-party library space. But if you're just looking for something that's built into the standard library and is kind of light on syntax, then run catching might be for you. So what about me? What do I think? Well, I think it all depends on what it is that you need when you're dealing with the exceptions. I would say that a try-catch expression certainly brings more attention to the exception handling part, because you've got all this real estate dedicated to handling the exceptions. It also keeps the exception handling close to the call to the risky code. Whereas with run catching, you can see we don't really have anything dealing with the exception handling in the run catching call itself. Certainly the intent is that later on you'll deal with it at some point, but it could be farther farther down your code. It could be farther out the call stack somewhere. So I would say that when you need to catch a particular kind of exception, or when you need to emphasize the exception handling part of it, that a try-catch expression is certainly a good option for you. If you want to de-emphasize the exception handling, you're mostly concerned about what that risky code is doing, maybe there's a low likelihood, or maybe it never actually would happen in practice that you would get an exception, then runCatching might be a good alternative for you. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. See you next time.
You've read the chapters online, and now I'm proud to present the Lean-Puff edition of Kotlin, an illustrated guide. Take the book offline with you, mark it up in your favorite PDF software, and get early access to new chapters as they're written. You can pick up your copy today. Just go to book.typealias.com.